there are dozens of sleeping pads on the market from brands like Thermarest, Nemo, Exped, Big Agnes, and REI. But who makes the most comfortable sleeping pad? I think having a comfortable sleeping pad is one of the most important things for sleeping comfortably on a backpacking trip and enjoying that trip. Some of the most miserable trips that I've been on have been on trips where I've brought an uncomfortable sleeping pad. There are a lot of options out there, but today we're going over the top 3-season comfort sleeping pads and figuring out which one might be the best fit for you. And at the end of the video, I'll tell you which one is my go-to. For years, the Thermarest X-Lite has been the go-to for ultralight backpackers, but I have spent hundreds of nights on that pad, and I can tell you that it is one of the most uncomfortable pads out there. I still use the X-Lite when I want the best warmth to weight ratio, but when I'm prioritizing comfort over warmth, then I've been reaching for the Zoom UL from Big Agnes a lot more often. The Zoom UL isn't the most comfortable pad on this list, but it is the lightest. It's also comfortable enough. With all of these pads, the benchmark that I kind of set for whether it made it onto this list was whether I've slept through the entire night without waking up to toss and turn due to being uncomfortable. For me, that is the true test of comfort, and the Zoom UL achieves that while still being in a very lightweight package. Something to note with the Zoom UL is that while it does have an advertised R value of 4.3, based on my real world testing, which is something that has been coming up more and more often, is how these pads perform in the real world relative to their R value rating. The Zoom UL just isn't quite as warm as that rating may lead you to believe. In my opinion, it's more around the 3 mark. If you're looking for a cold weather option, check out the Exped Ultra 5R. This pad has an R value of 4.8, but in my opinion, sleeps a little bit warmer than that. I've taken this pad out in some of the coldest 3-season conditions you can encounter, where the ground is frozen, the air is at freezing or just below, and this pad has performed phenomenally. It's because it uses a synthetic insulation that is welded to the top and the bottom of the sleeping pad, so it creates a really robust insulative layer between you and the ground. While vertical baffles aren't necessarily the most comfortable for me, the Exped 5R is one of the most comfortable pads with vertical baffles that I've slept on. That's because it uses a 20 denier polyester fabric for the shell, and that polyester has a little bit of give to it, is nice and soft, and that makes this pad really comfortable. My wife, Steffi Poo, has had a chance to test pretty much all of the pads on this list, and when we're going out on backpacking trips together, this is the pad that she chooses because she stays nice and toasty warm. That's a priority for her while still being comfortable. The best pad for feature lovers out there is the Sea to Summit Etherlite XT. It is a super comfortable pad. This is one of the most comfortable pads on this list, but it's not the warmest. It has an R value of 3.2, but sleeps under a 3 in my opinion, just due to the way the insulation is suspended inside the pad. But I think ease of use can be something that contributes to comfort, and there's a lot of great features with the Etherlite XT. First of all, you have the pillow lock system, so if you have a Sea to Summit pillow, then you can install these Velcro strips and then just stick your pillow right onto the pad. That keeps your pillow locked into place, so it's not going around the tent and you're having to chase it around the tent and bring it back on your sleeping pad over the course of the night. It also has the best valve system out of any pad that I've ever tried. It's a 2-way valve, so you open up one flap and then you can insert the inflation sac into that and then inflate the pad really easily. Then you open up the second flap and it dumps all the air. And it dumps the air very quickly and it makes it really easy to put this pad away. With the first flap open, you can also press on the valve a little bit and it's going to release air, and that allows you to fine tune how firm this pad is. If you're trying to maximize comfort, then I recommend around an 80% inflated level, but for some people out there, you might need to deflate it quite a bit more. Just keep in mind that as you deflate the pad, you're also decreasing its R value and its warmth. The storage sack that comes with the Etherlite XT is also really innovative. It doubles as a storage sack and then also as the inflation bag. So you pull out the bottom of it, creates this big inflation bag, and you use that in order to inflate the pad without having to use nearly as many breaths. You'll notice that we've seen 2 different kind of baffling systems on the sleeping pads that we've looked at so far, and these are the only 2 baffling systems that have made it onto the most comfortable sleeping pad list. We have the vertical baffles of the Exped pad, and then we have the dimpled pattern of the Etherlite XT and the Zoom UL. I find these 2 baffling systems to be the most comfortable. Horizontal baffles like you'd find on Thermarest pads just aren't comfortable for me. I find my arm going numb and falling asleep, and I'm just tossing and turning a lot more over the course of the night. That's especially true because I am a side sleeper, and I find as a side sleeper, it's a lot harder to find a comfortable pad. If you're a back sleeper, I think it's a lot easier, and a pad like a Thermarest may still work for you, and you get to take advantage of that great warmth to weight ratio. But while most vertical baffle pads sleep pretty similar to me, like I said, with the Exped, you do have that polyester top, which makes it slightly more comfortable than other pads. I found that not all dimpled pads are created equal. To give a little bit of context as to what's happening with these dimpled baffling system pads, you have these lowered areas, these little lower areas that are weld points within each of the pads, and then raised areas in between them. And these raised areas act as kind of air springs, kind of like what you'd have at home in your bed with the spring system. And these air springs are what relieve pressure points when you're laying on the pad. As you lay on them, they compress a little bit, and that's relieving pressure points really effectively, especially if you're a side sleeper. But the difference between some of these kinds of pads, and it's a little bit more evident with the Zoom UL and the Etherlite XT, is how big those springs are. And that kind of dictates how stiff they are. So with the Zoom UL, you have less distance between the bottom of the dimples and the top of the raised areas compared to the Etherlite XT, which means that spring is a little bit shorter and it's not going to be able to relieve pressure points quite as well. When you press down on the dimples of the Etherlite XT, you get a lot more travel and a lot more give compared to the Zoom UL. So people who like a little bit of a stiffer pad, I guess, a little bit of a stiffer mattress back at home, may like the Zoom UL. It may relieve those pressure points really well, especially if you're on the lighter side. Whereas if you're a bit heavier or you like a bit of a softer pad, then you may have to go with something like the Etherlite XT, or maybe my go-to option, which we'll talk about later. I think this pad gets slept on quite often as a pad that is a great comfort budget option. It's the Big Agnes Divide. I have it here in the 25-inch wide version, which is something that I recommend if you're looking for a comfortable pad. Get it in a wide version. I know 75% of you who have sleeping pads right now are running 25-inch wide versions versus the 20-inch wide version. But for those of you who are getting into backpacking or upgrading your pad, just go with the 25-inch wide version. The Divide is a great pad because it has pretty comfortable vertical baffles. It does use a nylon shell, so it doesn't quite have the same kind of softness as Give as the Exped, but it has a respectable R value of 4. So it's going to sleep comfortably and warm. It only costs $150, which is the lowest price out of any of the pads on this list, and it often goes on sale for $100 or less. So that's a great deal. You do have to sacrifice weight. This pad is the heaviest on the list at 851 grams, but when you're getting into more budget-friendly options, you're going to have to sacrifice something, and often it's weight. Now for my go-to pad, this is the pad that I've been taking on most of my trips over 2023, and it has the perfect balance for me of warmth, weight, and comfort. The pad's the REI Helix, and this is the most comfortable pad that I've ever used. This was highlighted for me on a recent trip where I forgot the pad straps for my quilt. Normally, I need those pad straps to lock the quilt onto the sleeping pad so that it doesn't create air gaps and drafts as I toss and turn. But because of how comfortable the Helix is, I just laid down, fell asleep, and did not toss and turn once. I just slept comfortably on my side with no pressure points, same side all night, and then woke up 8 hours later. It was pretty crazy. And this isn't the first time that I've slept through the night on a Helix. It happens pretty much every single time. It has phenomenal dimpled baffling systems, a lot of travel. I like a really soft pad with a lot of pressure relief. And this pad has dimples that have more travel and more spring even than the Etherlite XT. It also has an R value of 4.9, which makes it one of the warmest pads on this list. In real world conditions, it doesn't sleep quite as warm as the Exped, but pretty close. They're neck and neck. And at 700 grams for just the pad without the stuff sack or anything, it's a respectable weight. It's definitely on the heavier side as far as pads go, but for me, I'm willing to sacrifice that weight in order to achieve a ton of comfort and warmth. Comfort is subjective, so some of these pads may or may not work for you. And if you're someone who can sleep on a rock, then just go with the X-Lite for that warmth to weight ratio. But hopefully this gave you a good idea of some of the pads that are out there and some of the options you have if you do prioritize comfort. If you're trying to find the most comfortable camp pillow to pair with your most comfortable sleeping pad, then go check out this video right up here. I've tested dozens and dozens of pillows in order to find the most comfortable options out there. And some of them are lightweight options, some of them are bulkier options, and some of them are kind of in between. And I go through different categories just like I did with these sleeping pads.